Hi, my name's Mickey Ferrugiaro, and this is the video class that goes along with the tutorial for my celebration tin. This is a little tin, it's a little chocolate box that we've recycled, a little Trader Joe's chocolate box, and we've made it with a magnifying top so we can clearly see what's inside. Lots of layering on, lovely mandala on the back, and clasp and triple hinge. So it's a great project to work on. I know you've all been anxious to get started with this, so let's do just that. So here we are with rows 1 and 2 strung. And basically, your repeat on this is 10 beads. It's 3 of your A beads, then a B, A, B, A, B, A, B. So you do that, and then you repeat it so you've got it done 21 times, and that gives you your 210 beads that will go around the tin. So this will be going around the base of the tin. Row 3, we're going to step up, join it into a circle by going up through the first 2 beads. It's very much like we started the tape measure if you did that project. And row 3 is really nice and easy. It's all worked in the A beads, and you're just going to work in tubular peyote. So when you get to the end, you'll step up, and then once we've got this row, we will actually put it on the tin and start working it. So work this row, and then we'll put it onto the tin. So here I've done row 3, and I have slipped my beads onto my tin. Because I bead tightly, I had to ease this out a little bit so I could get them on the tin, and then I've got to check. So you need to check that all your beads are laying correctly. You see here we've got a bit of a twist going on, so we want to make sure that that's laying flat, and we've got all smoothness all the way around. Now you can pull this tight once you've got it on the tin. If you're a tight beader like me and you had to loosen it, you can re-tighten it. And if you're a loose beader, tighten it up. And if it does still fall off, my trick, and which you'll be using on the lid section, is Band-Aids. The little pad keeps the glue off the bead, and we can just pop that on there so it doesn't fall off. We can just peel it back when we're going to bead that section, but it helps, you know, if you've got it falling off all the time. You don't want that. So row 4, we're going to work 4 of our lime greens, our B beads. So there's our 4, and then 1 of our teal beads. So basically you're putting the same color on top. If you've got a teal bead, you put a teal on top of it. If you've got a lime bead, you put a lime on top of it. Okay, so this is row 4. It's 4 of your B beads, 1 of your A beads, all the way around and step up. Row 5 is like row 3, all done in A beads. So basically row 3 and row 4 are what you're going to repeat until you've got down to cover the tin. Follow your tutorial for the number of rows, and then we'll come back after that. Here we are with our 21 rows done, and I have not stepped up the end of row 21, so I'm still coming out of row 20, and that's because this is where we add our base row for our second layer. So you're just going to work into the same beads as you did for row 21 and work a second row 21, and for me it's in our little purple beads. So just going to work in, and they're going to sit on top. And once you've worked this, then we're going to step down. So when you finish, you'll add your last bead and you'll come through this one, and then you're going to step down through those 2, right? So that you're stepping back down into that first row 21. So we continue for the back of the tin. Okay, so finish this row and step down, and we'll come back for that. Okay, so I finished my base row, the second row 21, and I stepped down through the original row 21. But right now I've threaded up my tail thread because we're going to finish these rows so that we close this up around the lip so that when we're working around here we can do our closing and we know it's all going to stay on. We're not going to be pulling here and pull the whole thing off. Okay, so nice and simple, we're just going to work 3 rows using size 15 Delicas. In my case, I've gone with the green because this Duracoat turquoisey green that we're using doesn't come in a size 15 yet. Sometimes those colours take a while before they get manufactured in all the sizes. So we're going to go with our 733 lime green. So just 3 rows of the 15s, and that will snug down over the lip. Lots of thread catching with our teeth showing here. And you can see straight away it starts to curve around the lip. 3 rows will do it. So work 3 rows in 15s and we'll come back. As you finish your 3rd row of 15s, what you want to do then is weave down, because we're going to put in a base row for our hinges. And you want to come down to this stripe. So we want to be exiting the first of one of these dark stripes, one of your A bead stripes. Okay, and we're going to work on top, but we're going to work in exactly the same colours because we want our hinge to disappear. So on this one we're going to put a 2nd row, so working into the beads of row 1, we're going to add 1 of our A beads. It's going to sit on top. And then we're going to weave through. So as we're coming out of that bead, we're just going to weave around. And you're weaving through about 10 beads. That's 4, 6, 8, and there's our 10 beads that were woven through. And that brings us out for a stripe. So we're going to be using the lime beads here. So here we're going to work 4 beads in. There's 1. 2. 3. And 4. You can see there, get the right angle, you can see those standing off. And then we're going to weave through another 10 beads. Well, there's 2. 4. 6. 8. And 10. And now we're right in the next stripe, next of our dark stripes, our A stripes, and we're just going to add 1 bead in there. Okay, so you can see, if I tip the angle down, you can see we've got our A beads here, 1 on each side, and 4 of our B beads here. And that's where we're going to anchor the hinges. Okay, so now we can finish this thread, weave it through securely and trim off any excess. And then that's all be ready when we're putting the hinge on, which is pretty much the last thing that we do. Okay, now I've threaded the working thread from where I left off on row 21. I've rethreaded that. And now I'm going to work 2 rows. So I'm going to work, the first row is with our, we start off with an A bead. A little bit harder to get through here when you've got those extra beads on, but it just for a moment, get the angle right and then you're off. Okay, so it's the 4 beads. And this is row 22. So it's just working 1A and 4B beads. That's our A. And you want to work this all the way around and then work 1 row just in the A beads. And then we'll be ready to start shaping for the back. Okay, so now we've worked rows 22 and 23, we're going to start to do some shaping. Our first decrease happens on row 24. And what we're going to do is we'll work in our lime green, our B beads, and we're going to work the 4 stitches. And then when we come to where we would normally put in one of our teal beads, we're going to skip that bead. So just a skip stitch. So this row ends up being all in the lime green. Okay, so this is this row. We'll come back for row 25. With row 24 in, row 25, we're using our A beads, which for me is the tealy colour beads. And it's just 1 bead per stitch until we get to the decrease gap, which we're almost at here. And over that gap we're going to place 2 of our teal beads, our A beads. And that's all there is to this row. So all the way around with this. And then the next row, row 26, you can work in the lime beads. And the lime beads will be 1 bead per stitch. And you'll just treat these 2, the pairs of A beads, as 1 bead. So you're just going to go through those as a stitch. Okay, so work this row and then 1 just in the lime green. And then we'll come back for row 27. So here I've got rows 25 and 26 in. And row 27, we're going to be working in our A beads again. And we're going to work 2 A beads to start. That's our second one. And then when we get over our 2 beads, we're going to add one of our C beads, which in this case is orange. So that's what you're going to work all the way around. And then we'll come back for the next row. We'll be pulling in more of that orange colour. Okay, so row 28, we start off with 1 green and then we work 2 oranges, and those oranges sit at each side of the existing orange bead, and then we work 2 lime greens. So that's a repeat as you're working around, 2 orange, 2 lime, and then of course you'll finish with that 1 missing lime green there. Okay, so work this row and we'll come back to do for rows 29 and 30. Okay, so we can see the nice punch of this orange coming in here. And for row 29, we're going to continue working with our orange beads. and we're going to work 3 of the orange, and then just 1 of the teal, our A bead. So you can see we're creating points of the stripes as we're going around. So work this row, and then the next row you're going to work all in the orange beads, in your C beads. So that's all there is to these 2 rows. It's always fun when you start to see the pattern taking place. Okay, so work these and we'll come back for row 31. So for row 31 we are going to add a little spot. So I'm using my D beads, which is pretty turquoise, and that's our bead 1, and I've changed direction. You may have noticed this is an easier way for me to bead. And when you change direction, just make sure that you're actually working. You can do it on a round design that's all the same, because you can just switch the direction, make sure that you're going out of the same bead. You're just at the other side of the point. Okay, so 1 of our D beads, and then we're going to work 3 of our C beads. So staying in that orange and adding the turquoise spot. So that's all there is for this row. And the next row, you can do that too, because it's going to be just all in the orange beads. So in your C beads, just a row of C beads. Nice and easy. And then we will come back and do a little bit more decreasing. Okay, now while I was gone, I put a white piece of paper sticky label onto the tin, and that's mainly so that you can see what I'm doing. The only time I'd say to put this on is if you're using any transparent beads. If you decide to do a colorway with transparent beads, you don't want the tin showing through, so covering it with white first would be a really good idea, so that you don't lose the beauty of those transparent beads. Okay, so we're back to do row 33, and row 33 has got a skip stitch. So we are going to work 3 of our C beads, and then when we get to our 3rd one, and we're going to skip the stitch right above the turquoise. So it's nice and easy to remember. We're just going to skip above that turquoise and work around just doing that. So through the 2 beads for the skip. Row 34 is worked all in our C beads, and just going 2 beads, and then we're at the gap over the decrease, our skip stitch. So here we're going to add the 2 to fill in that gap, and that's all it is, all the way around. Nice and easy. And we'll be back for the next row. Okay, so row 35, we are adding another spot. So you're going to start with a D bead, and then work 2 of the C beads, D bead, 2 Cs, etc., all the way around. And you see your spots will sit right in between the 2 previous spots. And that's all there is to this row. We'll come back for the next row. Okay, so we got our spots in for row 35. Row 36, we're still working with our C beads. We're going to add one C bead, two of our E beads, which in this case is red, and then another one of our C beads. And that is the repeat all the way around. C, double E, and C. Okay, so work this row, we'll come back for the next one. So we have our row 36 in. Row 37, we're going to continue working in our E beads. So we're going to put one E bead at the side of our pairs. And then we're going to add one of our C beads to finish off that point. Okay, so that's what we're going to do on this row, and we'll come back for row 38. So here I've been working row 38, and basically what I've been doing is I've been putting a red bead at each side of the orange bead, and then in our 2 bead gap I've been adding one of the turquoise. So this is basically the E beads, 2 E's, and now I'm stepping up. That was the D bead. Okay, so that's your repeat around there. And then for row 39, we are going to put in 2 of those turquoise beads, but we're going to start with 1 and then 1 of our reds, and that finishes that little point off. And then we go into 2 turquoise, and then 1 of the reds. And that's all that is all the way around. Okay, so you can see we're getting that little turquoise V coming in there, and we're finishing this nice wavy line in the red. So work this row, and we'll come back for row 40. So here I am finishing up row 40. Row 40 is a really easy row of just working in the D beads. So here is my last stitch with my step up. And the next row, row 41, we're just going to continue the red over the red and then our turquoise over the turquoise. So that works out as 1 red and 2 turquoise, or 1 E and 2 D's, all the way around. See, we're going to give these, turn these into a sort of little petal. So work this row, and then the next row is all done in the D beads again. So you can work that row, and we'll come back for row 43. So there we are with row 42, and you probably noticed with row 42 those beads were tight going in there, which is great because row 43 is a decrease row. So we're going to get rid of that little bit of tightness. So we're going to work 2 stitches in our D beads, and then we're going to skip that stitch over the red bead. So I'm just going through the 2 beads at either side of that red one. And that is our skip stitch. So that's all there is all the way around. 1, and then the second one you can go through the next 2 beads, like so. One stitch, and your second stitch going through those 2, the next 2 turquoise. Nice and easy. Okay, so work that one all the way around and we'll come back for the next row. Row 44. Row 44, again working with our D and E beads. We have a D going in, and this is just going to finish that little petal off. And then we're going to put 2 of our red beads in for the next stitch. And that's all there is to it, just 2 stitches in the repeat. 1 with the turquoise and 2 with our red. Okay, and then you can go ahead when you finish this row and do the next row, which is all worked in the red beads, so all in your E bead. Okay, so this row and the next one, and we will come back for row 46 when we're adding another colour. Okay, so I have put in my beads for row 45. That was just 1 of our E beads per stitch. And then I'm starting here for row 46. And here we've got 2 yellows over the 2 reds. So that's 2 G beads over our E beads. And then 1 E bead. And that's the repeat. 2, 1. All the way around. So finish this. And the next row is all done in our G beads, so you can then put 1 G bead per stitch. And I will meet you back for row 48. So here I'm putting my last bead in for row 47, and the step up is a little bit different because as I've gone through my stitch and I step up, my next row starts with a skip stitch. I'm going to skip through the next yellow bead, and then this row is nice and easy. It is 2 beads per stitch and a skip stitch. So it's 2 beads, skip, 2 beads, skip. So this is what we're going to have when you see here. It's this little shape, this kind of little oval shape going on. So you can work that going through the next 2 beads. And then the next 3 rows are much the same. We're going to work in our F bead, and we're going to work 3 rows of 2 beads per stitch. So we'll be filling the gap in, then going over and going over again. So just like you're putting in the 2 beads per stitch, here we're skipping there, you'll have 2 beads going over the skip stitches. Okay, and then 2 more rows, so total of 3 rows, 2 beads per stitch in F beads. And we'll come back after that. Here we are with rows 49, 50 and 51 in. You see that fits really nicely in there. And now we're changing colour again, and we're going into our A beads. Now this row is a slight decrease. We're going to decrease in every 3rd stitch. So we're going to work 1 A in the 1st stitch, and then 2 A's in the next 2 stitches. Then we're back to our single, and then our 2 doubles. Okay, and once you've worked this row, the next row you're going to be able to just put 2 beads in every stitch in the A beads. And we'll come back after that. They're getting very small in there now. Okay, so row 54, nice and easy. We're using bee beads and it is just one bead per stitch. So work that one all the way around. And then the next row is very simple too. It is 2 beads per stitch, again using the bee beads. So you can work that one too, and we will come back for row 56 and another colour change. So here we are with rows 54 and 55 in, and row 56 is just our H beads, which for me is this little lemon colour, and it's just 1 bead per stitch. So work this row and then we'll come back to work the next row, which is a little bit different. So row 57 is a decrease row, and we're going to decrease 2 stitches out of every 3. So we're going to work 2 stitches with 1 of our H beads, and every 3rd stitch we're going to put 2 in. So 1, 1, 2. And there's our 2. And you can also work the next row. The next row is just 1 H bead per stitch. So work this row, the next one, and we'll be back. Okay, so here we are after rows 57 and 58. Row 59, we're going to work 1 of our H beads and then 2 of our D beads in the next space, and then 2 of our lemon beads, then 2 of our turquoise beads together. Okay, so that's all the way around, just basically working in the lemon or the H bead, and over the 2 beads, a pair of beads, you're going to add 2 Ds. Okay, so row 60 is our skip stitch row. So we start with a D bead and we skip through the next 2 yellows, and then we add a D bead at each side of the pair. And the second one you can go straight and skip through the next 2 yellows. So nice and easy. Add a D, go through the 2 Ds, add a D and go through the 2 H's. Row 61, we're going to put 2 of our D beads over our 2 D beads, and then 1 of our H beads over that skip stitch. So really easy row. And the next row is even easier, because you will just use 1 D bead per stitch. So we will come back after you've completed this row and the next one. You can see our little flower shaping up in the center here. And now for 63, row 63, we're going to skip this first stitch, and then we're going to just add our 2 D beads in over our 2 D beads, and then we're going to skip that next stitch. So you end up with just 7 stitches left. So here we are after row 63, and for row 64 we're going to add some of our little 2mm. This is a 2mm round, and those are just going to go so they sit in between our pairs of turquoise beads. You can see how nicely these 2mm sit in with the Delicas. Just perfect. Okay, and then once we've done this, we're going to work around in our black Delicas, our little 15 Delicas. Just one bead per stitch, and then I'll come back and we'll put the center in. So work your next row and we will come back. Okay, so now we just have to fill this hole, and we're going to perfectly fill it by adding one of our little hex beads. This is a 2-hole hex. You can see here we've got our little 2 holes going on, which really helps us since we've got 7 beads in the center. 7 is difficult to, transfer down and work across, so this works really well. First off, as we're coming out, we're going to step up through our first of our little 15 beads. That's where we want to be coming out, and then you're going to go through the first hole on your little hex bead, and then we can get them to lay in properly. And directly opposite the 15 will be one of our little 2mm pearls. So we're going to go through that. I'm going to turn this around this way. So we're going to come through our purple little 2mm, and then we're going to go through the second hole. So you can see here I'm coming through the second hole now. Oh, needle slid right out there. So there I'm going through the second hole. Now you can see how this pulls in. Just pop him in place. And now, coming out of the 15, we were here. We're going to go through the 2mm at the side of it, and then the 15. That was where we started, and then we're going to come through the next 2mm. It's our second pass to make sure that this bead is going to sit nicely, and I'll give it a nice tug so it lays in place. And then we're going to go through that first hole again, and this time on this side we're going through the 15, that original 2mm that we went through on the first pass, and then the 2mm, the 15 on the other side, and then back through that second hole. And there you can see, just give it a nice smooth down. Our little 15 is not wanting to go there. There we go. And then we can finish off our thread because we have finished with the bottom. Okay, so weave your thread in, and then we're going to come back and we're going to start working on this second layer. Here we are to do the second layer. And what you want to do first is weave in a thread securely and have it so it exits one of the base beads that's above this stripe, so it's the one that's right of center. You want it coming out of that bead so that we're in the right place. And all we're going to do for the first 3 rows is work in our F beads. So just 3 rows of peyote stitch using the F beads. So work those and we'll be back right after. So here I've got rows 1 through 3 in, and we're starting with row 4. Row 4 we're going to have a skip stitch, but it's going to be a little bit different. So we're going to work 4 beads, still using our F beads. So here are our 4 beads, and now we're going to skip a stitch, only we're not going to have the thread come across. If we were going to go through here, our thread would be seen across this bead. We don't want that, so we're just going to go underneath. We're not trying to close those beads up, we're just going to skip it. So you see there's no thread showing there. So that's all there is to row 4. 4 stitches and then skip the stitch in that manner. Work all the way around. And we'll come back for the next row. So here we are at the end of row 4, and you can see our gap is right the way over that center stripe there. And for row 5, we're doing much the same thing, only this time we only have 3 beads. So 3 of our F beads, and then we're going to step down 2 and then step up through 3, so that we're weaving through that skip stitch and we still don't see any threads. Okay, so that's all there is to it for this row. Just 3 beads and then weave through. Nice and easy to go down to, and then step up 3. Okay, so work that row, we'll be back for the next. Row 6, again, same thing, we've just got 2 beads this time. So 2 beads, and then you're going to go down 3 beads and up 4 beads. Wiggle that needle through. And then you're ready to do 2 beads. Nice and easy. Down 3 and step up 4. Okay, so work that row and then we'll come back and add our last bead, which we're actually going to attach to these 2, this pair of A beads underneath. Okay, so I'll show you how to do that on the next round. Okay, for row 7 we've just got 1 bead to add, and we're going to do it a little bit differently. You're going to put your bead onto your needle, and then you're going to come backwards through those 2 A beads below. And you'll see it pops into place, and then you're going to come back and weave through it. As you do that, it'll just attach it so that these don't flap back. Okay, so we'll do that one more time to show you. We'll go up through our beads, step up into the gap, add your bead, come backwards through those 2 A beads. Bead will pop into place, and then come back through it and weave down. Okay, and that'll finish the bottom off, and you can see that just gives a really nice little petal shape around. Okay, so do that. You can finish your thread off, or if you've got a long thread, weave it through, because then we're going to be working upwards. Okay, so now that we've finished our second layer for the base, you can see it's really pretty, finishes off the mandala beautifully, and we're going to start working the second layer up the side of the tin. And I've woven my thread in, so we exit so that my first bead is right here. You can see it's above this second lime green stripe, and we're just working in peyote stitch. And we have 2 rows to work in peyote stitch before we start doing anything fancy. Okay, I have my thread caught here. There we go. There we go. Working with a long thread, it gets caught on everything. Okay, so just find your right angle for getting in here. These beads are tight because they are the base row, so they're a lot tighter than any that you'll have to work with. Sometimes if you get this and you can come up easily through that next row, sometimes it's just easier to go with that and then just back out of that second bead that you went through. Sometimes it's just easier to work that way rather than risking breaking a bead. I've just got a little section here that are in really tight. So we'll do our little, is it going to let me? Well, it's going to let me go that way. This row gets tight because of we've already worked into it once, so it makes that much tighter when you put in the second row. You know, the row from the other side. Try it this way. Yeah, it's going to let me go that way. Okay, so just try your angle. Once you get something that works, usually it'll work all the way around, but you might hit a tight spot, so those are the tricks for when you hit that tight spot. Okay, so 2 rows, second row will be easy. 2 rows of this, we'll come back to add a base row for our third level. Teachable moment. As I said, when you're moving around, be careful not to break a bead. I broke one right here. So I'm going to show you a quick fix for this. So I broke this bead as I was trying to get through it. So what I've done, what we do here is we add 2 beads. Then we come back below where the bead we broke. So this is the first bead that we added, will be the bead that we were adding. The second bead is the one that we were going to go through when we broke it. So then you just go through it again. Let's lift it up over here. And see? Our broken bead has disappeared. We filled it in, no problem. So if you do have a bead that breaks, that's the solution. So you can't tell. I'm sure that'll give you a lot of relief if you've had this one break on you. Okay, so we'll continue on. I'm still working this row. I've got another one to do after this. Okay, so here I am after finishing row 2, which was a lot easier than row 1. I'm sure you'll agree. And now it was so much fun to do row 2, we're going to do another one. We're going to create a base row for the third layer. So I have not stepped up at the end of the row 2, and for the base row we're going to work another of the rows, but this time we're going to use our D and E beads. So on this color, so we're using turquoise, so we're going to add 1, 2, 3, and 4 of our turquoise. So we're adding 4 turquoise, and then we're adding a red bead. Now this red bead is going to sit over that green, center green stripe. That's where it needs to be. So if you're not in the right place, use less of the beads to make sure that that goes in the right place. Okay, and then we're back to the 4 beads. If you joined your thread in where I said to, then you'll be fine. If you didn't, then you might be a bead off. So just make sure that's in the center. It's very important. Okay, so other than that, it's just working the 4 D beads and then 1 of the E beads, whatever colors you're working in. Okay, so work all that all the way around and then we'll come back. We're going to step down into this row, back into our original row 2. So you can step back down so you're coming out of this bead when we finish. Alright, I'll meet you back there. Okay, so here we are after finishing our base row. I stepped down into this bead right here, and then I worked a row in F beads for row 3, and now we're at row 4. And for row 4, we're going to work 3 F beads. So here is 1, 2, 3, and we're going to be in the same spot as our little red bead up there, only this time we're going to add a G bead, which for me is this bright yellow. And now we're going to work 4 stitches in the F bead. It's 3 and 4, and then we're back in that position for our yellow bead. Okay. And that's what we're going to work all the way around. We'll be back for the next row. Row 5, we're going to do much the same. We're going to work in the F and G beads. This time 2 Fs to start, and then 2 of our G beads. They will sit at either side of our existing one. And then we go into the full repeat, which is 3 of our F beads. Where's our 3? And then we're back to our 2 G beads, the yellow ones in this case. One and 2. So you can work this row, and the next row will just be 4 of the F beads with that 1 yellow bead going in the center. So yellow in the middle of the 2 yellows, and the rest of them are F beads. Okay, so work this row and work the next row, and we'll come back. So here we are after row 6. Now rows 7 and 8 are like 5 and 6, so you're just going to be adding, as you work your purples, you'll then add the yellow at either side of the previous yellow. Okay, and then the next row you'll be putting the yellow just in there, so it'll be, this row is 3 purples and 2 yellows, and the next row will be 4 purples and 1 yellow sitting there. So work those 2 rows and we'll come back for row 9. Okay, so I worked rows 7, 8, and I've also added in row 9 as it's just a row of F beads all the way around. And now we're working row 10. And row 10 is nice and easy. You're going to put a yellow bead on top of the yellow bead, and then everything else is going to be the purple, the F bead. So nice and easy for row 10. You don't really have to count on this one. You can just go by the bead that you're working on top of. So here we are coming up to our yellow again, and a yellow on top. There we go. So that's what you're going to work all the way around, and then we're going to start working some points up here. So that's going to be next. This will be the base bead of our point. So work this row and we'll start row 11 next. For row 11, we're going to add the yellows at the side of the yellow. And then we'll have 3 of our purples in between. Then we'll get the yellow at each side. Okay, so that's what you're going to work all the way around. And then we'll come back. The next row we'll be doing a skip stitch. Row 12. Row 12, we're going to sit the yellows at the side of the yellows. We're down to 2 of our purple beads. And then as we put in this yellow at this side, we're going to go down those 2 yellows. And then we're going to step up. So we're skipping that stitch with no thread showing. See? Then we're going to start that again. So yellow, two of the purples, yellow, and we're skipping. Okay, all the way around, and we'll be back for the next row. Row 13, we're doing the same thing, only we're down to 1 purple. So a yellow, a purple, and a yellow, and then we're going to weave all the way down those 3 yellow beads and step up the 2 yellow beads. Okay, so then we put our yellow on there. So that's all there is for this row, just 1 purple and the 2 yellows and weaving through. You can see our little points forming, and we'll be back on the next row. Row 14, and we're down to just our yellow beads. So we're going to pop 2 beads in, and then we're going to weave through. Stepping up, and then our 2 yellows. And I'm sure you can imagine what row 15 is. You're going to do the same thing, just popping the 1 bead into the point. Okay, there's no need to anchor it because it's sitting really nicely. Okay, so work this row, then finish the row off. So we've got our points, and then when we come back, we'll be working on a 3rd layer. Okay, so here we are to work on the 3rd layer, and what I've done is woven a thread in so that it exits a red bead, so one of our E beads. And we're going to work this row. It's a nice easy pattern. It's one of our reds, one of our turquoise, which is the D bead, another one, and another one. So that's 3 Ds, and then we're back to E's. And here we're going to just put E's at either side of the existing one. So 2 E's and then 3 D's all the way around. And that's all there is for this row. Row 2. The repeat for row 2 is 1 E bead, 2 D beads, 1 E bead, and then we're going to skip the stitch. And we're skipping the stitch without the thread showing. So here's the repeat. One of our E's, 2 of our D beads, and then an E bead. And we're going to skip here, and we're going to do it without the thread showing. So we're going down those 2 beads, so we're coming out of the base row, and then we're stepping up. We don't need to cinch the beads in because they're going to just lay on top of these. Okay, so then we're back to the repeat. So work this all the way around, and we'll come back for the next row. Row 3. For row 3 it's a little bit different. We're going to still put our reds at the side of the reds, but this middle stitch, instead of putting a turquoise, we're going to add a Riso. This is the K bead, if you're looking at the numbers. And then we're going to weave down. So we're going to back down to the base row, because we still want to keep our little V's free of thread. And up. So all that is an E bead, a K bead, and an E bead, and weave through. And you see they sit up nicely against the beadwork. And here we are stepping up. And then the Riso. And weave through. Okay, so work that all the way around so that you have all your Risos in between your flowers, and we'll come back for the next row. Row 4, we're going to put in another of our red beads at the side of our Riso. And then weave through so that we're just finishing off that nice flow of a line. Okay, so that's all it is, filling in those gaps and weaving through. So a red, or an E bead, and another E bead, and weave through. Weave up this side, and that's all there is all the way around. So this will finish the top section, and once you finish this row, we're going to then start down and work the little zigzag this way. Okay, so after finishing row 4, I stepped straight down into the base row to come out of this bead here, and our little pattern here for row 5 is 2 beads in the turquoise, which are the D beads, and then one of our G beads, which in my case is the deep yellow, and then four of our D beads. Little tricky getting through on this row. Sometimes it's easier to go up through 2 beads. It wants to take me up even more. Okay, if you go up and go through it on this side, that works quite well actually. And then pull your thread down so we can do the next one. Blue beads aren't so difficult. The red beads are a little tricky. Okay, and then our yellow again. you note that the yellow is going right underneath the Riso bead. And that's going to be the high point in the zigzag. Okay, let's try that red one again. Through the red and go up. Yeah, that's really easy to get your needle through there. And then just make sure your thread comes between those two beads. Give it a pull down, and then you can go into the next bead. And then another turquoise, and then our yellow under the Riso. Okay, so that's the pattern for this row. So work that all the way around, and we'll come back for the next row. Row 6, we're starting with a turquoise, and then we're going to work a yellow on either side of our existing yellow, and then we have 3 of our turquoise beads, and then we're back to the yellows. So 2 yellows, and then the 3 turquoise. And that's all there is for this row. And we'll come back for the next row, which will have our skip stitch. Row 7, and we're going to start with a yellow bead, and we're going to do that skip stitch that shows no thread. So we're going through the 2 beads and then stepping up. And then we're going to do one of our yellows. We're down to 2 of our turquoise. And then we're back to the yellow with the skip stitch. Okay. And then we keep repeating that all the way around. And we'll come back for the next row. Okay, so I've just finished row 7. I've put the last bead in, and the step up on this row is all the way through our yellow beads. So we have to step up all the way through there. Okay, so here we are, row 8. And row 8 is one of our yellows, our G beads, a D bead, and a G bead. And of course we're going to weave through the V. Okay, so there we go. Yellow, turquoise, yellow, and weave through. So that is where we're at. Work that all the way around, and we'll come in and do the next row. Row 9. Row 9, and we're down to just 2 of our yellow beads. So 2 stitches and a weave through. All the way through to our next spot for our next 2 stitches. All the way through. Make sure that if you ever see a bead like that, see how that thread is twisted there? If your bead's not sitting right, just make sure that thread isn't twisted. Okay, stepping up, and again our 2 stitches. And you can do the last row because it's just one bead and weave through. So I think you can do that one. Okay, so your last one will be just putting that in. So finish this row and then add the last bead, and then that will be the base of the tin complete. Here we are with the third layer all finished. You can see it gives a really nice kind of lotus effect around the sides. And that is the base complete. So next, the lid. Yes, my nail polish has changed. I was wearing the lime green for about 6 weeks. I needed a change. So here we are working on the lid. And the thing with working on the lid, you're definitely going to need the band-aids, because getting this on, you're doing it in the same manner that you did the base on the tin. It's exactly the same, but because it's so narrow, it slips off a lot. So my trick is to put band-aids on. That way the padding keeps your beads clean, doesn't get adhesive on your beads, and it just keeps it hanging on there so that you can work. I have worked my 9 rows of the stripy design, and I'm working my 3rd row of 15 delicas, and that is to turn it over this edge to keep it on. And I'm doing that now, finishing this up. I've got this row and 1 more to do, and I wanted to show you at this point because you want to make sure it doesn't slide too far up or too far down. You'll see it's standing up on this side, because when we come back to work on this side, we'll be doing a decrease row. I'm joining these 2 beads as a skip stitch straight away. So it will shrink that down. So these beads need to be stood up. Don't worry about that. They need to be above that level. So 4 rows of the 15s on this side just cover the rim nicely. Okay, so if it's sliding, it looks like you're going it way too far, and if you pull it too tight, it'll come up. You don't want that. You want to make sure it's down. So we're just gonna, row 3 should be about where we are. Should just be coming over, and then we've got 1 more row to put in. Okay, so I'm going to finish those rows. I'll come back and show you just what it looks like before we start working on the decreases. Okay, so here we are after finishing row 4 of our little 15s, and you can see it's pulling in quite tightly. It won't come in as far as that when we've got this row done, because this row will snug everything up tight and this will come out further. What we're going to do before we finish this thread is add our beads for our hinge. Just like we did for the base, so I've woven this thread through so it's exiting into that center bead. So we're going to, first bead's going to be the center bead on a dark stripe. So we're just going to add our bead in here, working into the 9th row. And then I've got to weave through, just like I did on the base. We're going to weave through 10 beads, so that was 2 and 4, 6, 8, and 10. So we're ready to put our lime beads in. And this is the size 11s, not the 15s anymore. And we're just going to work 4. There's 2, 3, and 4. And then weave through our 10 beads again. So there's 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10, and that puts us in the space just to add our one A bead. Okay, so now that I've got all that in, I can weave this thread in securely and trim it. And then once I've done that, I'll come back and we'll start working on this row, which will tighten everything in and we can get rid of our band-aids. Okay, so now I'm going to be working into the beads of row 1. And what I've done is I've woven my thread so that it exits this bead on that deep stripe. So the A stripe, we want to be coming out at the side of it, so that our first beads are the line beads. And we're going to work 4 of our line beads. And then we're going to skip that 5th bead. So on this 4th bead that I'm putting in, I'm just going to go through the next 2 dark beads, the A beads. So once again we're skipping that A, and you can see that pulled this straight up as we were working there. It already pulled this side up. So you want to keep your tension quite nice and tight on this. You're able to pull it without this sliding off. Okay, so that's all that there is on this row. 2, 3, and on our 4th one we put in our skip. And you'll see that the beads begin to curl right over there already. Oh! Pulled a little too tight there. So hopefully we'll get these beads back on here. There we go. Fairly easily. So if that happens to you, you can know it happens to me too. Okay. It can be rectified. Once we get this row on, it won't happen anymore. Okay, so there we go again. Our 4 in lime, and then our skip stitch. It's actually really cool when it happens on camera. I can show you how to fix something. Okay, I'm not pulling too hard this time. Okay, so work this row and then we'll come back. Before we go any further, we're going to step down and we're going to add our row on here to put in our base row. Okay, but I wanted to just get this fixed onto the tin lid first. It's much easier to work with once it's fully attached. Okay, so work this row with the decreases and we'll come back and add our baseline row. So I finished row 1 on the top and then I've woven my thread down to exit row 4 on the side, and you can see this, it's out of the 11s, it's 1, 2, 3 11s, or if you're going to count from the bottom with the 15s, 1, 2 15s, 1, 2, 3 11s. So 5 beads up from there is where you want to be coming out. And here we're just going to add a base row for our second layer. So you're just going to work into the beads of row 4. Okay, all the way around. It's nice and easy. And when you're finished, weave back up to come out of row 1. And then we'll continue from there. So now we're ready to work on row 2 of the top. And this row, we're going to work in our C beads. And for me, that's the orange. And we're going to work 3 stitches with 1 bead. And then over our gap we're going to put 2 beads, so that over that skip stitch. And that's what we're going to do all the way around. Make sure that that sits just nicely on top. And you can pull quite a good tension on this row so that it'll pull in those beads even more and pull this edging back. Give it a nice sharp pull. Okay, so that's your pattern. It's 3 stitches with 1 bead and 1 stitch with 2 beads. And we'll come back at the end of this row. Row 3 of the top is just one of our C beads per stitch. And so that's a nice easy row. I'm just coming to the end of it. And my last stitch and step up. Okay, and so now we're on for row 4. Row 4, we're going to start with 2 of our C beads. Then we're going to put a pair of them over the existing pair. And then we're going to work the 3 beads, which is the repeat. So your repeat there is 2 beads in 1 stitch and then 3 single beads. And we're back to the repeat now with a pair over a pair and then 3 single bead stitches. And you can work the next row because it's 1 bead per stitch. So we'll come back after that, and that would be row 5. I have the wrong numbers in my tutorial right now. I need to change that. Okay, so that would be row 5. So this is row 4, and then you'll work 1 bead per stitch for row 5, and we'll be back after that. Row 6 starts with 1 of our C beads, and then we're going to add 1 of our D beads over the pair. So that's going to give us a little bit of cinching up, like step 2 of a decrease. Okay, so you'll have 3 of your C beads in the repeat, and then the 1 D bead. So you can see how that sits. And then you can work 2 more rows, row 7 and row 8, and they will all be in C beads, 1 bead per stitch. Okay, so we'll come back for row 9. Row 9 is worked just in the C beads, 1 bead per stitch. And now we're at row 10, and this is a skip stitch row. So we're going to start with a C bead, and then we will do a D and a C, and then we're going to come to the skip stitch. So that skip stitch is right on top of that turquoise spot. Okay, and then we're back to C, D and C and the skip stitch. So that's what you're going to work for row 10. So row 9 just in C beads, and then row 10, so we're skipping this stitch over the spot. Okay, and we'll come back for the next row. For row 11, we're going to be adding 2 of our C beads. We're going to do 2 stitches in the C beads, and then we're going to put 2 seed beads over the skip stitch. So 2 stitches with 1 seed bead and 1 stitch with 2 seed beads all the way around. And the next row you can do row 12 because it's just C beads, 1 C bead in every stitch. Okay, we'll come back for row 13. Row 13, we're going to start adding some red. So we're going to work 1 stitch in our C bead, and then over the 2 C beads, that pair, we're going to put 2 red ones. That's the E bead. on this one. So the pattern as you're going around is just 2 stitches with C beads and 1 stitch with 2 E beads. Okay, so you can work this one all the way around, and we'll come back for row 14. Row 14, we're going to put one of our red beads at each side of the pair. So that's 2 E's, and then one of our orange beads, our C bead, to finish off this point. You can see we've got a little point going on there, and that's a repeat. So red, red, orange. Or if we're going to do it in letters, E bead, E bead, C bead. Okay, and the next row, actually the next 2 rows, rows 15 and 16, you can work because it's all done in our E beads, just 1 bead per stitch. So finish this row, then 2 rows just with 1 E bead per stitch, and we'll come back after that. For row 17, we're going to work 2 stitches, continuing in our E beads, and then we're going to bring in another colour. This time it's F, and for me that is the purpley bead, and that spot is going to stay right in the middle of the little scalloping that's going on there. Okay, so all the way around, 2 E beads, 2 stitches in E, and 1 stitch in F. So you can work that all the way around, and then for row 18 you can work 1 stitch, 1 bead per stitch using the E beads. Okay, so this one with the spots, and then a plain row of the red, 1 bead per stitch, and we'll come back after that. So here I have completed row 19, because row 19 is just 1 E bead per stitch. And row 20, we're going to do a skip stitch, so we're going to reduce it some more. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with 2 of our E bead stitches, 2 stitches in E beads, and then on that second stitch you can go through the next 2 beads. You see they're sitting at either side of this point. Okay, that's what we're looking at, going through there. That's our skip stitch. So just 2 stitches in E beads, there's 1, and then on the second one you can go through the next 2 beads. Okay, so work that one all the way around, and we'll come back to the next row. So row 21, we're down to 2 beads in the repeat now. So the first bead is a single bead, E bead, and then we're going to put 2 E beads over the skip stitch. So 1 and then 2 all the way around. And then you can do the next row, row 22, it's just going to be 1 bead per stitch, and that's going to be the E bead. So again in the red, just 1 bead per stitch. And we'll come back after that. Row 23 is a little bit different. We're going to put a pair of beads over our existing pair, but we're going to make them 1 of our F beads and 1 of our E beads. So that sits over the pair, and then the next stitch is 1 E. 1 F, 1 E. and then 1E. So that's what you're going to do all the way around, and then in the next 2 rows you can work just in E beads, 1 bead per stitch. Okay, that'll actually close up this decrease. We'll end up with 1 bead over these 2 here. Okay, so work this row and then 2 in just the red, 1 bead per stitch, and we'll come back after that. Okay, I'm just going to show you here. I'm now working row 25. You probably had this happen to you on row 24 where it kind of curves up because those beads were really tight. We're losing that in row 25 as we're doing that second section of the decrease, where we're just putting the 1 bead over the pair. And if you give it a nice pull and just press it down and around as you go, but don't worry too much about it, because the next thing that we're going to do is add our cap. And so we're going to put another row in here which will actually alleviate this issue. So don't worry about it, you're doing it fine. I know when things like this happen, you all begin to question it. So don't worry about it, we're going to be addressing it, and no problems at all. So when you finish row 25, don't step up, because we're going to work a second row 25 so that we can have our cabochon encased. Okay, so work this, finish this row and don't step up, and we'll come back to work the base row for the second layer that creates the bezel for the cabochon. Okay, so here we are, not stepped up after row 25. We're going to work a second, and this time I'm using D beads, which for me is this turquoisey colour. And you're just going to work into row 24, just as you did for the previous row. Only these beads are going to sit on top, and they're actually going to make the other bead pop. So you can see it's going to lift it up, which is why I said not to worry about it lifting up on the on row 24, because it's going to do that anyway. Okay, so you can see just working into the beads of row 24, working a second row 25, and sometimes getting your needle in the right angle until you get going. And you see how it pulls those beads up so that they kind of sit on an end, and it creates a nice you see this is a little tight right now. When we lift these beads up, this cabochon will fit in perfectly. So as we work around, it will just pop that up. There we go. Yep. Little tricky. It's just a matter of getting your angle right. There you go. See how that lays? It pops these beads right up. You see that? Get the camera angle right. If I pop one in, you can see how this works right here. Pop. And you see that this bead just turns that bit, so it creates that little wall. That's what we're looking for. If you pull it, your thread tighter, it'll work. Okay. So work this row, and then we'll come back and we'll start encasing our cabochon. So now that we've finished the second row 25, the base row, we can pop our cabochon in. And it will just pop in. It literally goes pop. Just stays in there. It pops right in and will stay. Okay, so when we come back, we're going to be working on the casing, the bezel on here, and the little edging. One other thing I should mention before you put your cabochon in is just make sure that you clean your fingerprints off the clear screen. And make sure that the cabochon is clean too. Give that a polish before you pop it in there. That way, clean the back too. That way you've got a nice clean, view, and you haven't got anything stuck in there that's going to detract. It's always really nice to find you've put that in and you've got a lovely dog hair or cat hair in there. So just watch for those things if you're a pet owner. Okay, so once you've got your base row in, we're going to start and close this up. So the first row is nice and easy. We're working in towards the cabochon, and we're going to work this first row and the second row just with the D beads, 1 bead per stitch. So 2 rows around, and then we'll come back and start reducing. Okay, we have 2 rows in, and row 3 we're going to work 2 stitches in our D beads, and then we're going to skip the next stitch, and we're going to skip it without the thread showing, which means we go through, instead of just going through here, our thread will show, so we're going to go through the bead below so that we get no thread showing. Okay. And then 2 more, 1 and 2, and then the skip stitch with no thread showing. So we're going to work that one all the way around. We'll come back for the next row. For row 4, we're going to add our last bead into this point to give our little scallops. And there we go. And then we're going to weave through the next 4 beads. So here I'm doing the 2. So we're going right down that little divot. There's 2, and then up those 2, so that we're in the next gap to add our next bead. And here I can go down. If you get your needle at the right angle, you should be able to go down 3. Right? So that's the one that makes the stitch plus 2 down, and then the 2 up. Okay, and that will be how we finish up this row. This will be the last row on the inside bezel. Okay, so I'll come back and we'll weave our thread to the outside so that we can work the outside of the bezel. Here we are for the last bead of row 4, and when you're putting this bead in, what you want to do is just travel all the way through. If you wiggle your needle enough, you should be able to get it to come out of the base beads. There we go. So you see we're coming all the way down through to exit a base bead. And then we're in the right space to start row 5. So row 5 is just a row of D beads. So you can go ahead and put that row in. There we go. A little bit, getting your angle right. Like I say, a lot of problem with beading is just being able to find the right angle to get your needle through your beads. But that will do it. Okay, so work this row and we'll come back for the next one. For row 6, we're going to introduce our end bead. This is our fire polish. And we're just going to pop 1 bead in there. So this is like our increase bead. And then we're going to work 2 in our D beads. Okay, and you can see that that fire polish is sitting right on the same row as the point. So it's right on that point. So there we go with another one. And then 2 of our D beads. And you'll see as you pull your thread, if you pull your thread this way, you make a little bit more room to put that fire polish in. There's one. Oh, don't want to pull that one in. There's our second. And the fire polish. Okay, so once you've worked that row, you can work the next row, which is all just done in D beads, 1 bead per stitch. So you'll be going 1, 2, 3 in between each fire polish. Okay, so work these 2 rows and we'll come back. Row 9, the final row, we're just going to add the 1 bead to the point. And you're going to go through, if you can get your needle through the 2 delicas and then through the fire polish, that's typically the best way to go, if we can do it. There we go. So that just puts your little point on there. Okay, and then you'll just need to step up through those 2. It can be a little tricky on this round just because you're stepping up through that fire polish. It makes it a little bit more complicated. Not as easy to get your needle in. Okay. But once you have, and you just press those down, you'll see those points settle down quite nicely when you're not pulling your thread tight all the time. Okay, so here we go again. Oh, there we went through that time I managed to get through the 2 delicas at this side and 1 delica at that side. If you can do that, that makes life very easy. And this will complete this section so you can weave in your thread and trim off any excess. Okay, and then when we come back, we'll be doing the points down the side of the lid. Down here. Okay, so now we're going to work our second layer down the side of the lid. And the first row on this is just working into those base beads, and we're going to work 1 row. So 1 bead every stitch all the way around. Okay, and then we'll come back and we'll start doing our skip stitch so that we can make the little points that go all the way around here. So we'll come back for the next row. This one's just G beads all the way around. Row 2, and we're going to have a skip stitch. So we're going to work 4 of our G beads. So that's 3. And 4, and then we're going to skip this stitch without the thread showing. So we're going to go up through the base bead, so through the bead we'd normally go through plus the base bead, and then we need to step up back into our row. Okay, let's do that again. 1, 2, 3, and 4, going through our bead and up through the base bead. Hard to get our thread caught. And then step up. Okay, so you can see this is where our point is going to be, so our points are going to come down from this side. Okay, so work this row, we'll come back for the next one. For row 3, we're going to work 3 stitches in our G beads. And then on the third one, we're going to go weave straight up through the base bead and then step up through the next 2 so that our thread doesn't show anywhere. So let's do that again. 1, 2, 3 beads. That's our 3, just as you'd work them. And then you're going to weave through those 2 beads and then these 2 beads. So that's the 4 beads that you weave through. And you see it's curving nicely over the tin. Okay, so work that all the way around, and then on the next row you can work this one too. You're just going to do exactly the same thing, but just with the 2 beads. So you'll still be weaving through here. So you weave through the V all the way through there, so you'll be going down 4 stitches and up 3 stitches, up 3 beads. Okay, so those 2 rows, we'll come back and do the final row, which we're also going to hook onto the tin so that the points stay down. Okay, we'll come back for the last row, row 5. Okay, so we have row 4 in. On row 5, it's a little bit different. We're going to add the bead to our needle, and then we're going to go, you'll see that this gap, there's a green bead right in that gap. And you're going to go backwards through that green bead. And as you do this, your yellow bead pops into the spot, and then you're going to come through this way and go all the way through for that step up, so that we're weaving through. So you can see that's how your point finishes, and it won't come up, it's anchored down. So let's show that again. We're going to step up here. We're going to add our bead, go through the green bead that's underneath. Make sure just we're going through that one. There we go. Bead pops into its spot and come back through to do the step up all the way through. Okay, now there's one thing that you will notice when you get around to the hinge section. You'll see that that green bead that is on the surface for the hinge, you can actually just attach that into the point. So instead of adding a bead there, just go through the green one. You've got 2 of those, and that just keeps it attached down. You don't have to fuss with trying to get underneath that green bead in there. That'll work just fine. So there's row 5 complete, and at the end of row 5 I continued going right the way up through those beads so that I came out of one of the base row. That's where my thread is now, and we're ready to start row 6. For row 6 we're going to work 2 stitches in our G beads. So there's 1, and there's the second one. And then we're going to skip the next stitch, and the thread will be showing on this one because we want to just pull those 2 together a little bit. You can't cinch this up if your thread is going through your bead, so that's what we're looking at. And then we're going to work another 2 stitches to complete the repeat. So it's 2, skip stitch 2. But when you're working into it, you'll know once you get into the pattern repeat, it's 4 stitches between your slip stitches. So there's 4 and slip my stitch. Okay, so work this all the way around, and we'll be adding some fire polish next. Row 7, we're going to add our fire polish. And for that we're going to work 1 stitch in our G beads, and then over that skip stitch we're going to add our fire polish. This is our M bead, and then we're going to work 3 beads in G to get to our another skip stitch. And there goes our fire polish. Okay, so nice and easy. 3 yellows and a fire polish. 3 G's and an M. All the way around. And I'll meet you for the next row. Okay, so we've got row 7 in. And row 8, we are working just in our G beads, and we're going to be putting 4 beads in between our fire polish. So we start off with 1 into that fire polish, and then we have 4 beads. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And as we work, these are going to just do a really nice smooth curve around here. Okay, so that's really all there is to this row. 4 beads in between your fire polish. And we'll be back for the next row. So here we are for row 9. Row 9 starts with a pair of G beads. And those are going to sit right on top of our fire polish. See, they're right in front of it. There we go. And then we're going to work 3 G's, and then we're back to our pair. And that's all there is on this row. Nice and easy, curving over. This 2 beads here actually forms a decrease. As we continue working, you'll see that these cinch right in, and that acts as a decrease for us. There we go, 2 over our fire polish. Get the angle right. It's all about the bead angle. The needle angle. Okay, so work that, and we'll come back for the next row. Actually, you can work the next row, because the next row is just 1 bead per stitch, and you'll be just treating the pair of beads as one. So when you come there, you'll go through both of them. Okay, so work this row, and then work 1 G in each stitch. Okay? So here we are after row 9 and row 10. Rows 11 and 12 are basically the same as row 9 and 10. Like row 9, we're going to work beads, single beads in the stitches up until we get the pair. So above the fire polish, we're going to put another pair of beads in. So what you're going to do is just 3 beads, 3 stitches, 1, 2, 3 with 1 bead, and then 1 stitch with 2 beads. All the way around. And then across the next row, just 1 bead per stitch, just like row 10. Okay, and we'll be back after that. For row 13, we've got 3 beads in between our fire polish. So 1, 2, 3, and then when we get to the pair of beads, we're going to skip those. And we're going to step up through the next delica. So that's our skip up with no thread showing. And then we're back to working 3. Of course, because of tubular peyote, our start point moves around. You'll start with 2 beads and you'll end the little 3 section. You'll start with 2 beads and you'll finish it by adding 1 at the end of the row. Okay, so that's all there is to this. just those little step ups in there, skipping stitches and stepping up. And you can see the start of our little scalloping coming on right there as we work up these. Okay, so continue in that, your 3 beads and then your skip, and we'll come back for the next row. For row 14, we're pretty much doing the same thing. We're going to put our bead in and we're going to step down. So we're going to go through those two beads right there, and then we're going to go through our pair and then up the next 2 beads, so that we're keeping that V all nice and clean, no threads showing. And here it's just 2 beads, and then we go do it all again. So then we're going to do the step down through that bead, so that's 1, through the pair, 2 and 3, and then up the other 2, 4 and 5. That's the 5 beads that you're skipping. Okay, so work this row and we'll come back for the last one. At the end of row 14, you're going to have to step up before you can add your beads. So you're going to go down through your beads, my needle out here. So we're going to weave all the way through up to that gap. That's our step up for row 14. And so now we're ready for row 15, which of course we're just going to fill that gap in, and we're still going to come down through all these beads. So whether you do it 1 at a time or 3 and 2 or 5, whatever you've got to do to get around to that next gap, weave it around and then add your last bead. We don't need to anchor it down with it sitting on top, but that's what your point is going to look like. And once you've done this, we're basically looking at putting on the hinge and the lock, the clasp. So you can finish your thread off and we'll come back and we'll do that. The other thing you might want to do is, because we've been pulling and tugging with this as we've worked, we may have loosened these beads, these little 15s around here. So it's a good thing to work another row of, just to weave through your thread through again. Rework that last row to make sure it's nice and tight and it doesn't slide off. Hopefully nobody's had problems with it sliding off. But if you have, that's what you need to do, is just tightening it up. Okay, so that's what we're looking for right there. And I'll have mine finished when we come back, and then we'll be doing the hinge and clasp. Okay, so now we've got the tin complete, we're going to put on the hinges. And this is one little hinge. We've got 2 of these. I'm going to show you how to do it, but I just wanted to show you first how exactly this works. So here's, you want to be lining up your top beads, the surface beads, the beads that we put in. If you can see them on the bottom, and they're also on the top. These are the beads we're going to connect to. And we're going to connect these little stripes to the green beads that we had in the points. That helps you find exactly where things are. And you can see this is what's going to be attached. It's going to have a little bit of a curve on it. And it's going to attach into this green bead right here. Okay. So that's what we're going to aim for, and I'm going to show you how to do that right now. Okay, so I've woven a thread so it comes out of the lime green bead right here before this 3 A bead stripe. So this 11 B bead. And what you're going to do is you're going to add one of your A beads and go through the one that's on the surface. Then you're going to add another one and you're going to go through this lime green bead right here. Okay, and now we need to turn. So we're going to go through this little 15 that sits right on top of the one that we're just coming through. We're going to just carefully wiggle your needle through there. So you can see when I pull the thread in, we've just done that turn. And then we're going to step up through the green bead on this side. Okay. So now we've got 3 beads sitting on top. The next row, we're just going to put one in the middle. We turn, add one, and then we're going to go through both of these. Both of those on the other side to make the turn nice and easy. So we don't have to mess with the odd count turns. And then add a bead, and this time you're going to come back and you're going to go through those 2 beads. So you're not going through the one on the top, you're going through the second one down, the middle one and the second bead down. And then we're going to turn to step up. Then we're at our 1 bead in the center. And a nice easy turn. And then you're going to go down through the 2 beads. One more bead and across, you're going through the center bead and the second bead down on that side. Turn again and put the bead in the center. This is our last row. We're going to add 1 bead and we're going to go through both of them. Add 1 and cross over. Center 1 and second bead down. And then you can just turn. Oh. Turn to step up. Okay, so now we've got 2 of our little hinges ready to go. So next we're going to do this large one. So for the large hinge, I've woven my thread so it's coming out of this bead right here. And I'm going to add the first row, which will be in A beads. And I'm just going to work across. We have 5 beads in the row. And we're just going to add the last bead at the side, coming through the A bead. And then we're making the turn the same way we did for the little hinges, and that is by going through, carefully going through the 15 that's right above the one that we just came out of, the bead we just came out of, right there. And then we can go back up through the bead, the last bead that we added. And that's what we're looking like. Okay, so row 2 is worked with our B beads. So we just have the 4 across. And then a nice easy turn, nice easy peyote turn. And the next row we're working in our A beads. And we're going to go down through that last bead to do the same kind of turn that we were doing before, so that we can add that last bead. And on this, if you haven't done this type of turn before, it's really quite easy. It makes you not have to have that odd count turn. So I tend to do this when I'm working on smaller strips of beading that's nice and regular. We've turned now, and we're actually one bead in on the next row. So I've only got the 3 beads to put in before I turn. And I can turn for my A bead. 2, and on this third one, because I've got to go down to be able to put that other bead in, the lime green one I'm missing, so I step down, I add the green bead, and now I can turn to finish off this row. So with A and A, and I'm going to step up. I'm stepping up, and it's the middle of the row. If you've never done this before, it might be a little confusing, but it's really fast. It's a really great way to turn doing odd count peyote. Okay, so this, we're starting the next row with the lime green, and we're just the 2 beads in. And then we're going to turn and work in our A beads. On the second one, we've got to step down. And we have to finish that row with the B beads. Turn and then finish this row with the A beads. If you find this complicated, you can always just work it in odd count peyote. And here we're stepping up. And you can see we have our hinge done. And so we're over here. All we've got to do is, to get us in the right place for joining, is step down to the outside and then turn, and we're right in place now for our joining. Okay, so we have our 3 little hinge sections all ready to join. So as my needle is still threaded with the center thread, we're just going to zip this together right now. So I'm going to go through the first bead on the lid from that hinge base, and I'm going to just weave it through the next one on the bottom, and then through the next one. Let's pull these babies together, and there you go. So now we can finish it, just zipping it up just like you normally zip beadwork. There we go. So you can see that hinge blends in really nicely, and then we can turn, and if you go through that second yellow bead, not the point bead, the next one, that will just snug it right up. And then you can just weave back across so that you can fix it on the other side too. Just weaving across our little hinge tab. Till we get to the top bead on this side. And we can just hook it onto that second bead down right there. You see how that works? Through there again. And then we can weave this thread in. Okay, so to attach one of the side hinges, we're just going to go through the green bead on the lid, and then through the next one on the tab, and then we can go straight into that yellow bead, through the green bead and through the green bead of the tab. So we're just zipping this in, and we're going to turn back into the yellows, and that's our little hinge attached. So now we can just weave this thread in too. So attach this other one, the other hinge, in the same manner, and that's all your hinges will be set. So your tin will open. And so the last thing that we have to do is put the clasp on. Okay, so I'm going to finish off this, and then we'll come back and I'll put the clasp on. So those are the hinges all done. I will say, when you weave your thread in, it's really nice to weave it back through the clasp so that you can make sure it's really attached and firm. Always helps, because you know your hinge is going to get used. And the next thing we have to do, the last thing we have to do, is to add our clasp. And basically what you want to do here is, from this big hinge, you want to count 11 of the fire polish. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. This is directly opposite our hinge. And I have woven a thread. This is where we're going to be attaching the clasp. I've woven a thread to exit this bead right here. And we're going to add 2 of our yellow delicas, match our edging and our top colour. And then we're going to add the clasp. Little magnetic clasp. So we're going to add 2 beads at that side. And then 2 beads at this side, and go through that center bead again, so it pulls down. What we want is for this just to give it a little bit of sitting up. It's going to sit on top of the tin. Hard to show you with a magnet. I'm working on tin. But we want it just to sit up, and so it's on top of the work, if you can see that. So it just sits up. That's what we're aiming for, right there. Okay, so we're going to go through this a couple of times. In fact, we're going to... So next we're going to go through the bead to the side of the point, and then up through the 2 beads. Little tricky with magnets. I'm going to open my tin up. Might give us a little leeway here. Through the magnet and back through these 2. And this time we're going to go in through this one to this side. And we're going to go up through the center point one again. that's what we want it to do. You see how it's sitting up there? This is what we want. We want our little clasp to sit up off the beadwork. So we're just kind of creating a little arm for it. See that? Okay, so we're going to pass that a few more times, and then we'll do exactly the same thing with this side, and that will be done. So I'm going to finish working this side, and then we'll come back and do that side. Okay, so there we've got the first section of clasp on, and we're just going to do exactly the same. My thread's coming out of the point, adding my 2 beads, coming through the clasp, and adding 2 more beads and going. You see, this is it's very fiddly to do, is this? Okay, so I've added 2 beads at that side, gone through the clasp, and now I'm going through down 2 beads, so through the point bead and then the next bead. And that's where we're getting our clasp to sit up. Okay, and then we want to come through. You can actually open your tin a bit, that's easier to see. Here we go, there we go. So then you're going to go back down, so coming out of this bead, the second one down, you're going to go back through your beads, through the clasp, through the other 2 beads on the other side, and then you're going to go in through the second one down on this side, up through the point. Okay, so those 2 passes, coming out of the center, 2 beads, go through the clasp, 2 beads, then come down out of the second bead down, and then follow the bead thread path again, so that you're connecting into these 3 beads. You're going to make that pass a couple of times, because your clasp and hinges always get a lot of work, so it's a good thing to work them more than once. So as we close this up here, you can see that that clasp is now stood off, which is exactly where we want it. Okay, and so I'm going to finish this off now, and that is basically your little tin. So you can see your clasp will open. It's a good clasp. These little magnetic ones will hold it all the way down. Okay, so there's your little doodad box. Whatever you want to put in it is great. And well, the preparation for it was good, and I reckon you should celebrate with some chocolate.